Well, morning, fellow zombies. Are we alive yet? Are we awake yet? Well, I'm somewhat both. It's 12:28 in the morning. It's Sunday, the 16th of February, 2025. The Zombie Weaver, John C. of Roseman, California. Okay. So besides listening to the videos out there regarding politics and anger and vitriol and everything else going on, I have to switch off to different videos on YouTube just to see if there's anything else of interest. I come across the memory videos both on Facebook and also on YouTube to remember the music, the events, the things that happen, the food. Not exactly the politics, but lifestyle, culture. When I get somebody who's in his 20s or 30s trying to tell me about what the hell the time period was, I know there's a lot of older farts like me who grew up, actually born in the 60s and grew older. We're laughing at these assholes because I don't think they were caught it in the first place. They can do their biographical in the books or digital research, that's fine, but they didn't grow up in it. So don't tell me how you're going to experience these musics in this form or fashion because you weren't there. I hate it when these people do this. Remember when, and they haven't lived in that time. Because I'm constantly getting that kind of crap. It's like artificial intelligence trying to do this shit and no context, no perspective. They weren't from there. It's like me trying to understand my grandmother and my grandma, my aunt and my mother, who grew up under the big band era. My great aunt and grandma, before they passed, they were born in the early 1900s, just after the turn of the century. So they were familiar with jazz. They were familiar with soul. They were familiar with the original R&B growing up out there. They were also familiar with the original rock and roll when it came out. I remember there have been times watching television with my great aunt and my grandmother and ma on a Saturday night just before my show would come on of Space 1999 for a science fiction geek like I was as a young kid. We had Lawrence Welk, wonderful, wonderful, and a one, and a two, and I'm watching this thing and I'm listening to this music and I'm watching the horns with a cup right in there, right in the bellow there. And I'm listening to this. And I'm seeing these people dancing around and doing dance steps. I'm like, excuse me, with baking soda? Grandma and Aunt May and Ma were just smiling like crazy because they remembered the times that they were listening to this. And I really didn't realize it at the time that Grandma actually was a band leader for a regional area. She traveled in her area a little bit, Utah and surrounding territories. Not as famous as the other swingers, but according to the stories I heard, she was a leader. She was a piano teacher. She played piano. She wasn't into the reeds. She wasn't into the horns. She wasn't into percussion, but she can play a mean piano and sing, from what my family had told me. Ma barely played the piano. She was taught, but she didn't hardly use it. And having heirlooms transferred from one family member to another family member when they pass away, I look at the emblems, I'm looking at the artifacts. I don't get them. I get the purpose, yes, but not the magic that some might felt when they were using them. Especially when it came down for musical instruments. I just wasn't into it. A kazoo, maybe? I tried a kazoo. I tried a harmonica. Better at a kazoo than I was a harmonica. But I'm listening and I'm watching things as they were on on the internet. There are songs from this one particular posting out there on YouTube was talking about 14 awful songs. 14 awful songs. During the stretch between 72 through 79. There's like two or three disco songs out there. There was like a few other melancholy songs. There was a trucker song out there, remember? There was one particular song that kept singing on a constant basis that made me even cringe sometimes. But I wouldn't call them awful. I call them the song of the times because during the 70s there was a changeover happening from what was happening in the 50s and 60s into the 70s and 80s, and everything was in a flux. Everything was in a flux. Dress styles, cars, language, maybe a little bit. But the music was trying to adapt to it. There was a couple of tunes on there. I'm thinking, wait a sec, what? You couldn't even deal with these R&B songs at all? One guy who was singing I think it was Chuck Berry in there. He did this, my ding-a-ling, my ding-a-ling. And the guy who posted this he was trying to analyze this damn thing. I don't think he was born under the era to understand it. Because he sure as hell wasn't in the 70s or, 70s. That would have been able to figure the stuff out what happened back in 1970. I was in an era as a young kid listening to the songs, and it went over the head. It was just tunes I listened to. I listened to one lady of Debbie Boone. I think he was Pat Boone's daughter. And I know they're both spiritual and church going, at least now these days. And listening to her song sing You Light Up My Life. It could have been a relationship song. It could have been something else. I don't know. Could have been religion. I didn't care at the point. That would be my dog. Hold on. This is where reality hit kicks in. And then she turns around and goes back into the bedroom. Hang on. She's going to drive me crazy this evening. Sounds of my time. A dog wanting my attention at midnight. Ah. So, we're listening to Light of My Life. And yes, that was a melancholy song. But for some of them, back in the 70s, there was a romantic song that they would dance to on this one. Captain and Tennille did a lot of songs out there, not to mention Tony Orlando and Dawn. That easygoing, dancing tunes, and maybe something of a romantic or nothing, something like that. But the times that someone grew up in, you would understand something about the music because you're growing up under the situations and you're listening to the songs. It's like if I happen to go back and listening to Glenn Miller, I can hear the sounds. I can hear the melodies. I can deal with the lyrics. I can deal with that, but it wasn't of a time that I actually would appreciate it. Growing up, listening to the music, I listened to it, filed away in my head. I listened to the motion picture soundtracks. I listened to the rock and roll. I listened to the soul. Some of it I got. The rest of it was just sound. It was just noise sometimes. I got older. I got different perspective, different memories. But sometimes I needed to hear those particular perspectives to remember what the hell I was growing up through. Disco Duck was one of those funky disco things that you would hear. I mean, it was never a straight format when it came down for a musical genre or an era. Take an example. It's like comparing 1950s to 1980s. Vast difference on that one. And in the 80s, we would have anything and everything that went. Different themes, technologies, relationships, different formats to look at things. I would probably say the same thing for 50s and 60s because they had an era, they had a feeling, they had a theme. And the people who grew up in those themes, they had a feel, they had a groove. They were part of the movement, they were part of that time, that era. I could listen to the music, I could try understanding it, I could try appreciating the music and enjoy it. I listened to the Beatles when I was growing up as a kid. I listened to the Beach Boys. I listened to the Monkees. Those are three major lunatics I listened. No, not lunatics. Speaking of which, hold on. I'm babysitting a senior citizen who acts more like a damn child sometimes than I care to admit. And I'm reminded of times that my mother had taken care of my grandmother when she had fussed. Senior citizens, I'm going to be like that one of these here days. I hope not. The one thing I was expecting this one particular reviewer to talk about was Star Wars disco. There was at least 2 or 3 other funky songs that came from that era that related to that science fiction geekiness, shall I say. A lot different than dealing with Disco Duck or Saturday Night Live or Saturday Night Fever. Saturday Night Fever, if you were in that time, that mode, you're into the bell bombs, you're into the lighted panels on the floor, you're into the disco balls with the lights shining on them, and it would be multicolored special things all over the place. It would be hippie, it would be dancing, it would be grooving to the music, whatever the hell the lingo was during that time. I watched the shows. I'd watched the music shows that came on. American Bandstand, homogenized, but sometimes they put the weird on there. Soul music would be R&B right there. It'd be a soul right there. The Real Don Steele, well, also homogenized sometimes. But they all had their own little quirks of playing the music out there. What was out there. I couldn't say some of the songs that were played over and over again were, nerve grating. There was a lot of people actually liked the music. They liked the playing over and over again because it made them feel one way or another. If they're that melancholy, they needed something to get them through the days. And if you're on the road, you're listening to Convoy was something to listen to while you're commuting. Or if you're a trucker, and then you'd be laughing at the damn thing because your way of looking at it in truck driving was a lot different than a movie or the song when it came out. But for us younger kids, it was something interesting. Yeah, we saw BJ and the Bear. We also saw Sheriff Lobo on television. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 more movies out there. Smokey and the Bandit, it also did the CB Craze. So we watched that and listened to the music of that one. Jerry Reed singing. A guitar man. A guitar country man who was just doing some guitar. And yes, I listened to his music. Couldn't get into it as much, but it stuck in my head. Growing up with my brother and doing our traveling adventures, all those musics from the past coming together as our own traveling format. We had our mood, we had our theme, we had our music, we gotten grub, we gotten liter-sized Cokes to drink. We were traveling on the road. Granted, from one place to another place in San Fernando Valley or in Southern California. It didn't matter. We were cruising. We were fun. We were enjoying Seasons of the Sun. And speaking of that one, not to mention 110 Soldier rode away, and a couple of others from different movie things that my brother would identify. But Seasons of the Sun, every time I kept remembering that song back then, it didn't remind me of anything else. But my brother had to explain it to me one time. It was about a person committing suicide. That in itself, as I grew older, made me more weary of the song because now I understand it more and more. Somebody going through the phases of that thing that they're going through in their head, of whatever the physical environment is screwing them over, or whatever kind of events that happen to them while they're thinking about suicide, about killing themselves. This song would have been a song to identify with. And it made me more and more emotional about it as I'm getting older and older, and I'm understanding some of these musics out there, some of these themes out there. Yeah, they have more relevance because I've got perspective now, and I'm trying to understand more and more about it. In your own time, in your own era, wherever you're growing up, you understand the mood, the feeling, the music out there, no matter how lyrical. Ray Stevens in his comedy from the 70s, actually from the late 60s through the current, was still a laugh track for a lot of people. It's still something funny for them to listen to. They wanted something weird to get a smile on people's faces. And yes, he was uh, very folksy back in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. But folk music was basically rebel music because of the times that they were in back in the 60s when you did have a major war happening in another country that the United States was getting into. So there had to be something to explain things by, one way or another. Some of them got really political. They never mentioned anything about Dane Rusk, but that was back in the 60s on that one. But back in the 70s, when we're getting out of the Vietnam War, we're still trying to get into adjustment phases of the new economics and the new politics happening out there. I know I mentioned a couple of them. 110 Soldier Rides Away and Billy Don't Be a Hero. Billy Don't Be a Hero was something of a war song that could be applied towards any war song that we have. And to any war era that we're in. 110 Soldier Riding Away was something of the Billy Jack series I listened to. And I watched the movie Billy Jack with my brother. And I listened to the music, and I saw everything else on the damn thing. And every so often, we would play the music. Actually, we would play the music, and also we play the movie. Tom Laughlin in there, God rest his soul. He's really trying to show something of racial tension in his movies, and how things are, you know, perceived back then compared to now. I think it would have been relevant of all of it. But the movie, Once Tin Soldier Rides Away, I don't think anybody else caught that one. And it's very prophetic. Unfortunately, that kind of music doesn't seem to be relevant with anybody else's ears except for those who grew up under that time, and now I'm seeing it happen these days, and I'm wondering if we weren't projecting into the future. So I've got issues over those songs. They have brought out memories. They are reminding me of things that we're having right now that are related to the things back then, in one form or another. If we think times are good, then we listen to big band music with the horns blaring and the saxophone going and the xylophones. But if they're going crazy, then it's usually anti whatever kind of feeling we've got, and start making music over it. We've already got many songs concerning about the current administration in this time period and what they're doing. And what I kept saying is we allowed them to come into fruition. Now we've got it. Now we got to deal with it. Now how do we deal with it? Back in the 60s, there was a lot of marches happening, but then again, there was a lot of government pushback on it too. We may have to do that all over again. Bring back the 60s feelings and era. In order to do that, we still need to understand this particular time period in order to have someone else's time period come into ours and get interpreted or misinterpreted or reinterpreted, however you want to look at it. I mean, I'll still watch the Do You Remembers and laugh at the narrators who can't get it right, especially when they're doing the cooking. This is no longer there. This is no longer there. Are you kidding me? I constantly cook that crap. What are you talking about? Don't tell me you don't cook this meal and you don't cook that meal because it's what you say it's not there. Give me a break. If somebody else is already cooking it at home, they ain't telling you about it. So that's my little skiff right now as it is. I haven't been on the political crap yet. I know they're going to be talking all damn day long in all the channels right now of what's been happening last week or the previous weeks. I've been trying to get myself out of the political crap. I haven't been focusing on school as I should be. I've had emotional triggers kicking my ass these days. Yeah, 2025 is really becoming another year to be stacked up against the other years I've survived through. And things I'd like to get changed anyway, for the better, if it is possible. There's one particular thing that's going through my head concerning about the War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. Over the past 20 some odd years, more than that, there had been musicals made regarding the story of War of the Worlds. One of them, they call it the Walla Walla. Yeah, well, this particular Walla Walla was still having different formats. Bit disco, maybe not so much disco, but it had been interesting enough for me to listen to it and to go nuts over it, because I think it's music like that I still need to remember and enjoy. Jeff Wayne had done this musical composition, this orchestra, War of the Worlds. There was even a narration from a past actor. And he probably did the reading before he passed away. They saved his recording and made it into a computerized face. But the music that they were playing on there, haunting as it is. This is this generation I'm listening to. But as for music of previous generations, um, yeah, I don't know. There are things out there I probably will be listening to if I actually get into it, just listen to it. If I could just get into it and understand why the music was there in the first place. But the music of my brain is telling me that I must practice the chords of sleep. And sleep I will.